You are live. Do you see that? Do you see the
Yes.
you are live? So we are live. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. If you do jump in, come say hi in the chat box. We'll be really happy to see you. If you're watching this later, hello. I hope you're doing well. I'm Neha, and today I'm joined by the Kocharya's new project manager, Kiwa.
Yeah.
Kiwa say, hello, Kiwa. It's
Actually.
so great to have you here.
Thanks, Neha. It's really nice to be here.
Yay. I'm really excited to be talking to you about this concept called the science of scarcity. And yeah, we were having a discussion. To be honest with you, I was trying to jog my memory as to how it came up, but
Hmm.
I don't recall. I don't think you recall either. Catchy look on your face.
I
But
think I do actually.
oh,
I
okay. All right.
yeah, I think you were talking about you supported somebody during this COVID period,
Oh, yeah.
and
Ah,
yes, and then that's
that's
how the topic kind of came up.
awesome. It's so cool that you remember because it also shows that the topic means something to you and you were able to connect the dots when that happened and that it didn't quite click for me in the same way that it probably did for you because it's something that's probably quite close to your heart, right?
Right.
So, can you paint a picture for us as to how and when did you encounter this concept? Like, what is the context in which you encountered this concept and learn about it? What were you doing at the time?
Sure. Um, so I think just for context again, I have been working in the social development space and I've been associated with the space for about 10 years now. And when I just begun, I was part of a fellowship program. And as part of the program, like we teach in schools, so we interact with a lot of students from under-resourced communities. And so the first time I actually began to understand this concept was actually through an example that I like to share with you. This was with one of my students who wasn't very regular, with attendance, would skip school and would be somewhere out of school mostly. So I wanted to help her and I wanted to meet her parents and understand what's really happening and how we could help her. And I'd heard from a lot of people, and even she'd mentioned to me that that they were struggling financially, and like they had a lot of like things to figure out. And I felt that maybe there was something that they were struggling with, and maybe we could help out in some way. So I went to meet the family. And the first time when I met them, like I entered their home, which was just like a one room space. And I was really surprised actually to see a lot of expensive things in the house. So there was like an expensive refrigerator, an expensive television,
Mm,
and they were very excited to show me all the things that they had. And, I also tried to participate, but I was a little like, wow, like, okay, I wasn't expecting this. And just as we were talking, they did bring up a lot of times that they had loans to repay and there was a lot of burden on them. And I kept thinking, like, you have so much financial burden, then like why spend on such things? And I thought, maybe somebody gifted it to them, or I don't know where it came from, but it just felt like something wasn't fitting you know
mm,
and I remember talking about this to a colleague, and even she had had similar experiences, and then we kind of just like began to talk about this a lot, wondering why people would take such a decision. And I remember talking to the student, and she also said that we have to repay the loan, and I'm trying to help out my family with this, so I'm also trying to support in some way. And I just thought that, instead of investing in education, which is something so long term, like the child was thinking about repaying for something which probably, at least in my head, wasn't really rational, right?
mm.
And so, I mean, that was like the first encounter. And then there were several examples like these, right, that kept popping up in different forms. So the first time I actually got to know about the concept was actually through my manager. Like he mentioned it to me, and then I read up about it. And we also did this like learning time with the team where we read about science of scarcity and understood what the concept means. So yeah, that's basically how it came in. But I'll just take 2 more minutes to actually explain what the concept is,
Awesome.
because I'm
Sure.
sure that's your next question as well.
Exactly. You
you
read my
know.
mind. You're awesome. Yeah, go for it.
So basically, the concept is there basically there are two professors who got together to study exactly these mindsets, right? Like when you're going through scarcity, like how does the mind think? What kind of decisions does the mind take? And why are some decisions not very rational in that sense? So Professor Mullanathan and Professor Shafir, so they wanted to write a book actually on this, and they got together to study about this and then put together their findings. And so, I mean, I'm not going to get into too many details, but there basically two broad findings that came out of this. One is uh, that poverty actually taxes the mind, and they did this through a study where uh, I mean, we can try it with you as well, I guess, but not in that much detail. But let's say if you had a scooter, and you maybe use that to get to office, and your scooter's broken down and needs repairs. So suppose I tell you that the repairs are going to cost you $300. Part of it will be covered in insurance, and the rest you have to figure out. So like, how would you go about deciding? Like, what are the decisions you'd take?
Um, I don't understand really the question. Like, so what kind of decision am I trying to make here? Like, am I
Like,
trying to
should
figure out how to
I
put together the money or?
Yeah, like, or should I like fix my scooter, or like should like however, like what are the thoughts on your
Okay.
mind? Yeah.
Well, if I guess if I can walk, then I'll walk it. If there are other options like taking a bus or, getting a ride with a friend, I'll do that instead because the
Mhm.
commute seems to be essential. So I'll
Okay.
figure out a way to like an alternative way to the commute and then probably save up enough money that I can,
Mhm.
do that I can fix what is broken without affecting my lifestyle in other areas.
Okay. Okay. So maybe this was your thought process, right? So like, let's say now if we look at, so basically I'll get to the study, right? So what they basically did was they studied like a few people in the mall who, based on their incomes, gave their responses. So what they found out was that people, let's say who were the richer uh, income group, they were like, okay, we'll pay, like we don't have a problem, $300. And
Hmm.
the comparatively lower income group also were like, okay, $300 doesn't seem that bad, we can like, we'll pay. So the IQ levels as well, I mean, I don't know if they said we'll pay, but like whatever the parameters were like that they were checked on, but basically the IQ that was tested through the test, which was like a Raven's matrices, which is tests your skills on experiences and not really based on your academic levels or any of that. So it didn't show much of a difference. But later, when the amount was increased, they said now we'll move up to $3,000. So then they were keen to see what the difference would be, in the findings, and they found out that the people who were in the richer category, like for them, the IQs didn't drop much. Like it was more or less the same. But for people who are in the poorer category, like for them, the IQ dropped by almost 14 points, which was a huge gap, right? Because the moment like there was this crunch, which is from $300 to $3,000, there was this sudden like, okay, like we have to figure out so many things, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe there are other things to be paid for, there are other burdens around, so that
Oh,
your
that's what I was
IQ actually
thinking. That should tell you something. Yeah, interesting.
so yeah, so that was interesting. And in fact, they also did another study, which was like the same study with farmers, like sugarcane farmers in India. So this was even more interesting because what they found out was uh, that so the payment to the farmers is done seasonally. So when they took the test, when they didn't have the money, so the IQ tests were lower then and considerably higher once they got the money. And this was, of course, the same group of people. So this again, in a way, showed that poverty taxes the mind, and they describe something called like a bandwidth tax that we have, which is like, this is my bandwidth, right? Beyond that, like your mind actually feels taxed, right? Like for $300, it didn't feel, decision making still felt okay, and it showed in your IQ test. But when the amount was raised, your IQ tests showed a different result.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was one
So,
of the findings. Yeah.
okay. Just to make sure I understand this correctly. So when when the amount that needed to be spent was low and manageable for all groups, their IQ level remained the same. But when the amount was increased and it was like a huge value that they would have to
Yeah.
like plan for and figure out, then the IQ dropped in uh, certain
Income groups.
demographics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And it was tested by RSPM, which is Raven Standard Progressive Matrices, right? So that's
Yes.
it's not based on linguistics. It's just based on like images and patterns
Yeah.
and things like that. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So
So
so that's what you're saying, that the IQ seems to drop because there's way too much stress on the brain, or there's some or the other reason. Maybe we don't know the neurological reason. Maybe we
yeah.
don't really need
Yeah.
to.
Not
But
experts at it. So yeah.
yeah, but we can see how it manifests in the decision
Exactly.
making. Okay.
Exactly. You know.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and similarly, like the other finding also was that scarcity begets scarcity, right? So, like, many times, we hear people say that why do people, make poor decisions? Or like, let's say if you start a program, to support some people who come from, let's say, an underprivileged background, many times you might see that so they're not regular, or like they drop off after some time,
Hmm.
and you'll hear people say, "Arey, the willpower is low, they're not motivated enough," and it always goes on the person, right? Like, which is, why did you do this, right?
Yeah.
But they actually try to basically say that it's not about poor people making bad decisions. It's like the state of poverty, which is leading to decisions not being very rational, so, like, for example, if I want to buy something, I borrow money from somebody to buy that, right?
Hmm.
And the next moment again, like, we have to repay the loan. Maybe I don't have the money, so I again borrow from somebody. So in a way,
Yeah.
like, you kind of, fall in that trap. So,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
again, there are like reasons why that happens. So,
Okay. Um, so I'm a little bit confused here. I think
hmm
maybe what I want clarity on is what does the IQ drop lead to? Like, does it lead to poor decision making? But then
hmm
in the example that we used, the decision making was going and splurging on a big purchase as
hmm
opposed to storing and saving. Whereas
hmm
in the example of getting your car repaired, it
right,
was it was like
yeah.
that would but I think that's you're trying to talk about like what happens when somebody's stressed out in the car example, the repair example.
Yeah,
Whereas
and because of scarcity, right? Like, scarcity
yeah,
causes that to happen,
got it.
and I think with the example that I gave initially with respect to like the student, right? I
Hmm.
think, like, in a way it can fall under scarcity begets scarcity, right? Like, on one hand, like, one of the things that they also mentioned is that what ends up happening is when you're always operating it from a place of scarcity, your vision or your thinking kind of becomes really short term, or you operate in the sense that like, through a tunnel vision, right? Like, let's take another example. Let's say you're short on time, you have like 10 things to finish, but then there's a deadline coming up, right? And
Hmm.
you have to finish that work that has been given to you, right? So in that time span that you have, right, I'm sure you only think about that task, right? And even if there are other important tasks around, we don't really end up thinking because our mind doesn't really get to any of those,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's kind of the same kind of thinking.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to always, lead to something negative. Like, it doesn't mean that scarcity is always a negative thing. It can also be
Hmm.
turned into something positive, right? Like, let's say, because of the tunneling effect, I realize that, I want to stay focused, I want to do well in something, and
Hmm.
then we have examples of that as well,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Okay. So how does this play out in the under resourced areas that you mentioned and the work that you've done? How have you
mhm.
seen this play out in other areas?
I think it plays out in so many different ways, right? Like, I'll give you a few examples. Like, in fact, just recently, somebody I know was a little unwell, and so she uh, went to a hospital, and she called me from the hospital. She wanted, some money, like, just to borrow some money. So I asked her how much it is, and it was a fairly big sum. So I asked her, what happened? I thought like it's some serious illness, or I don't know what's happened. And she just said, I just need it right now for some medicines, and I'll repay, the money whenever I can. I said, okay, fine, I'll help out at the moment. And I met her 2 days later and I asked her, what happened and which hospital did you go to? So she actually went to one of actually the most expensive hospital in the area, right? Like, where even if I had to go, I would think, like, okay, do I need to go there? Like, are there other options? So instead of choosing something which is within my means, or choosing something which comes from awareness, right? That it doesn't mean that if it's an expensive hospital, the doctors are going to be the best, right? There
Yeah.
are other hospitals which might not be as, expensive, right? But you're seeing, right, like how in such simple ways, like decisions kind of play out,
Yeah.
uh, which probably don't help you in the long run, right?
Hmm.
Because let's say if you repay the loan, so now where does that money come from?
Yeah.
Instead, if right, and I mean, there's so many other examples, right? Like when we had, so we run this youth project where, like, we teach girls quilling, like making products out of quilling. And I remember in the beginning, like, everybody would be really excited, like, oh, okay, we're learning something new and we're going to, we're enjoying and all of that. But after some time, like, I remember in the beginning when I would say sometimes, right, like, oh God, the willpower is so low, or like, what's wrong? Why aren't they motivated? What's happening? Like those kind of questions come in. But you see that what's actually happening is, in the short run, like, it's all fun, but the long term connect to how learning the skill can actually help me, or that doesn't come in
Hmm.
so naturally, because it's never part of your complete awareness at the moment.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, so speaking about this, actually, I just thought of another example. I remember this was in another community in Pune, where we were working on a different project, and there was somebody else, another organization, working on another project. And I remember talking to the person uh, who was present at the moment. He said, I was like, what happened? Like, where are the people? So he said, today is the day when people have to return the money. So the line, like, there's hardly anybody in the line. So I said, what money is this? You know, so he said that, we give out these small loans to people so that they can start their own businesses. And I said, so what's happened with the money? He said, nobody has started a business. Like, somebody has either bought a motorcycle or maybe spent it on something else, like, like a television set or something. And so I asked him, so, like, why is that happening? Do they, you know do you want to tell them more, or do you
Hmm.
want to teach them how to actually use the money? He said, we've tried, like, we don't know what to do. you know so it's in these, like, ways that you see it actually playing out on the
Yeah.
ground.
So how the next logical question to me is, how do you then help someone who's
Mm-hmm,
struggling financially, or who
mm-hmm,
is from an under-resourced area, and
mm-hmm,
they don't have that kind of long-term vision? How do you
mm-hmm,
help them and support them if you can't do
mm-hmm,
it by giving them money?
mm-hmm. So I think, if you if I again go back to the concept and I try to draw a connect from there, I think one of the things that this actually teaches you is to empathize with the people and the condition, that is facilitating such a thing, right? It's not, uh, it's one thing to say, oh, okay, like, why is this happening? I tried my best, and nobody, no, I mean, nobody can guarantee, right, that one X thing that you do is going to lead to the result that you have in mind,
Yeah.
right? So I think one thing that it surely does for you is it opens up your mind to exploring other conditions that can actually uh, facilitate a more positive outcome, which at the moment is, I mean, it's not happening, right? So you, instead of giving up and instead of saying that this is not going to happen, you, as a person who's maybe facilitating the entire process, empathizes with the condition and thinks of maybe more positive ways to support. The other thing that I would actually say is, like, I'll again give an example to explain this. So um, let's take two examples, right? Like, let's say one example is about somebody saying, okay, we give you a lump sum and you start a business, right? Like how this example was with this program that wasn't working. But let's say you take another example which says that we'll get you all together and everybody, let's say, puts in a uh, part of, like, some amount of money, and every month a person gets like the lump sum to start something, right? But you don't just stop there, right? You help them to actually build on that awareness which is missing, which is that if you, let's say you have an additional program that says you're going to invest this money into an FD, okay, let's
Mm,
say whatever 80% of this, and this is the kind of money that you'll get in the next 6 months, in the next 9 months, if this money stays there, and the rest 20% of the money you use, let's say, for starting something. If you know how to knit, we're going to help you to get the material with your money. You start knitting and we'll help you to actually sell the product. So the next month when you have to put in your money for the group, you actually end up not touching any of the money that you got from the lump sum, but just from the sale of your product, from the extra earning, the profit that you've made, you're putting that money into the next month's, your share. So it kind
mm,
of opens up a new world of awareness and understanding of how I can best utilize my resources, which otherwise isn't a part of your usual thinking, right? Because otherwise you think that, oh, I got the money, what do I want to do? Right? Or like whatever my most immediate needs
yeah.
also in a way. So
Yeah,
it's
I
just an
mean, that's
example.
you gave a beautiful example of that in our previous conversation where you said on the even if we're struggling towards the end of the month, the minute we get our paycheck, like we want to go out and have a nice big meal or like spend it on something that we want and not
Yes.
necessarily need even. Yeah.
Exactly.
We all have the proclivity to do that a little bit. So what I'm hearing are two things that I'm hearing. One is that you cannot solve problems of like places that are like under resourced areas and stuff like that by just throwing money at it. There needs to be a certain mindset that you go in
Hmm.
with. Money
Hmm.
is part of the solution, but how you use that money and how you prime the people to believe that they can in the long run sustain an income seems more important. And the
Yeah,
second thing that
absolutely.
I'm taking away is that if you do want to give something, perhaps giving that kind of time to make them believe that or to support them in that way emotionally, and then also support them by giving them resources that can help them make money rather than
Yeah,
just giving money, right?
absolutely. And I think, Neha, in the entire process, like I said, right, you build that empathy for people. And I think that comes across, right? Like the other person knows that there's genuine care. And like this comes from a genuine place of wanting to actually empower us in a way,
Mm,
And I think, like, in whatever little I've seen, like when a person senses that, the kind of trust that you build with a person, I think that is what leads to any kind of change, right? Where a person begins to believe that, okay, there is something here. One is the program, and of course, the practicalities of the program and the thought process that you've kept in mind, maybe keeping this in mind. But one aspect of it definitely is the genuine relationship that you share with people, right? And I think for that to happen, you have to operate with that mindset, right? You have to empathize with the condition. You can't just go and say, like, there's no willpower or there's no motivation. Doesn't work like that.
yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things that we talk about in coaching as well, right? That we don't just give up on people. We have unconditional positive regard for people.
Yeah.
So I think and I think people can learn that in multiple ways. How I'm curious, how has this affected you having gone through that experience, having connected with so many people in such a way? Like how has it changed you and affected you as a human being?
I think um, I'm thinking about it now in such a long time, but I think it's definitely helped me to not give up easily, and also at the same time detach from the outcome, right? Like now when I look at an outcome that I have in mind of any kind, right, short term or long term, I look at it more as something that drives me, right, and gives direction, versus saying, oh, this didn't happen but I put in so much effort, right? But it's like
Mm,
every opportunity becomes a way for you to actually understand, even when you fail at something, you're like, okay, this isn't working, but what in the system can be utilized towards the outcome? Like initially it would, especially when you're working on, let's say, certain outcomes that affect only you directly, right? Let's say, for example, marks, right, in school.
yeah.
So if I study and I do well, it's like it's just very like linear, right? But when you're trying to do something for somebody else and the situation is completely different, the experiences are different, all of these things playing out, I think all of this has helped me to actually, like stay detached and be able to look at a situation as a third person, right? Saying that, oh, okay, so what's really happening in this situation? So I think one definitely is that, and it has helped me to like not give up easily and to continuously come up with solutions. Like one thing doesn't work, like don't let it bog you down. Okay, what else? What next? So
That's awesome. It sounds like a growth mindset. Like you're always solution oriented. You're always looking to solve the problem. You're not too fixated on what the problem actually is and like ruminating over it. You're always proactively looking for ways to solve, even when
I
you
think
get
so.
stuck, even when you hit obstacles. Yeah, that's awesome. I've definitely noticed that. And you don't give up on people easily. I've noticed that too, having worked alongside you for a little while now. Um, just in terms of how you reach out, how you follow up with things that aren't done, things like that. And I know Magda and Tracy also say the same. um, so yeah, that's fantastic. It's clear. And one of the things when I first talked to you as well, the first time I ever spoke to you, I really got the sense of like just warmth and friendliness. Now I don't know if that came from that same space or not. And I don't think it matters. I just wanted to put it out
I
there.
think that's a two-way process. So it's like what I got from you, I kind of gave back in return. So
Ah, awesome, Kiwa. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today and to share with us what you've learned about the science of scarcity. I
thank
really
you, Neha.
appreciate it. Yeah. All right, everyone. We
Thank
hope
you.
you enjoyed this session. We hope you learned something. Um, Neeta has a question. Can scarcity lead to better use of available resources? The other side
Yes,
of the coin. So
yes,
she's saying, I know it's circumstantial, but I've observed this in lower income groups, or yeah, we can call it,
yes,
under resourced areas, like Kiva said. That's a
yes.
beautiful term. Yeah. So
Yes.
I've put
So
the question up.
yes, I do
Please go ahead.
agree that I do believe actually that scarcity can lead to better use of available resources. In fact, uh, I run a foundation called an NGO called Mountain Village Foundation, and our program for children, it's called Little Entrepreneurs, and it's based on exactly what Neeta's asked, right? Like from a young age, can we help children to understand that even if resources are limited, we can actually leverage the limitation into something better and into creating something that we want to do, uh, just by utilizing them or viewing them through a different lens. That's what an entrepreneur does, right? Like for an entrepreneur at any level, it needn't even be, let's say, uh, I mean, there's always a lack, right? Like when an entrepreneur starts, it could be financial lack, it could be lack of talented people, it could be so many things, right? But you operate from that mindset, which is you can build the awareness and look at a situation through different lenses, I guess, and still create something powerful out of what you have. So, yes, I do believe in that a lot. And that's a really nice question.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you for your answer as well. That's really well put. Thank you for your question,
Yeah.
Neeta. Um, we'll just take 1 minute to see if there are any other questions or follow-up questions, and then we can call it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just while we're waiting, I'm curious about there we have this kind of hesitation almost to address, to call a spade a spade. Like Neeta has asked in her question, she's put lower income areas, and then she said, pardon me for this phrase. And I totally agree. Like I think we use terms like poverty or and you said under resourced, which again, it's just the explanation of it, just the description of it.
Mhm.
So I'm curious what you think about this.
I think it depends on like what you think about it, right? I It depends on the definition that you have in mind, right? Like let's say if I go back to the question Nita asked, right? Like it can also be if let's say from under resource in any way, right? It needn't be just based on income, right? It can be in any way, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and I think I view it in that sense, right? That it,
That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
I
like
mean,
your
yeah, I can,
emotional bandwidth as well, like you said earlier, right? If you have a lot of things going on, you're stressed out about a lot of
yeah,
stuff, you might end up making decisions that aren't the best for you. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So yeah,
Great. So it looks like we don't have any follow-up questions at this point. But yes, people, if you do have any questions, leave them in the comments. We'll get to them even after this video is published. We can get to them later.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Kiva, again for joining
Thanks,
us.
Neha.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. Have a
Thank you.
great
Thanks,
day,
everyone.
morning. Bye.
Bye.